recorded.
Hello, and welcome to the Platform GTM Sales Acceleration Series. Today's session is Deep Dive 2 Business Content for SAP BW4HANA, presented by Brian Wood and Natasha Marienfield. I will now hand it over to Brian to begin the session. Thank you.
Thanks, April. Good morning or afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining. I know this is basically a sales series, so I'm going to try to. There's a lot of technical information in the presentation. I'll try not to bore you guys with it, and we will have lots of time for Q&A at the end. Also, while we're going here, you can, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. I added this slide. Again, I'm going to, reiterate what April said. This is an internal audience, so I want to be completely honest with everybody here. The content that we deliver is a combination of things that are, for example, Natasha's team is responsible for and has built all of the HANA optimized content that runs on the NetWeaver on HANA, and they have also developed the two add-ons that provide content for BW4HANA. That content is, I'll say, is limited to the content that resides within BW. When you look at things like extractors, for example, which a lot of people consider content, technically they're not part of the content. Those need to be delivered through the horizontals of the business suite and through the verticals for industry-specific content. Right now, there is no formal process for collecting those requirements. So I'm asking you guys to help me. I'm not officially responsible, but I'm tired of us not having a process. So I'm asking you to collect from your customers and from the folks that you work with the requirements that you have. What are those things that are most valuable and most in demand in terms of content from the customers that you're selling to and that you're working with? You can send those directly to me. Natasha and I will go over those. We'll try to prioritize those in the backlog and get things built as quickly as possible. I've reached out to leaders in the industry groups as well as in the business suite and the S4 area. They know I'm doing this. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to prioritize my requirements, but I am going to give them requirements, and they're going to hopefully address those as quickly as possible. So again, I ask you to help by sending those requirements to me. I also ask you to help by being patient as we move forward with this. I do believe we'll get a formal process in place where we can collect and summarize and prioritize those requirements and get those pushed out to the industry unit and the business applications units that need to build. They need to build. I mentioned the extractors. They're also responsible for the info objects that make up sort of the lowest level of granularity within the content. And we can't do much without getting that from them. So we need to be able to push that, and anything you guys can do to help in making that a priority is very much appreciated. With that, I'll go ahead and kick off the actual content here. And as we go along, please, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat now, and Natasha will do her best to answer them as we go. And like I mentioned, we will have a live Q&A session at the end where we can open up the lines and you can ask your questions verbally if you'd like. So this slide probably looks familiar to a lot of folks because we used it before essentially with the HANA optimized business content, pretty much all of the same areas. So we have at a high level, of course, we have sales and distribution, materials management, finance and controlling. Then we break down into a little more detail in terms of subjects areas that are covered within those. I didn't mention the master data, but that obviously is important as well. So as we go through here, we'll talk about what's delivered in each of these larger kind of business areas, and then I do have detailed slides for most of the drill down. I don't want to bore you guys with technical details that are not important to you, so I'll go through those slides fairly quickly. But one of the things that I'll mention again as we go through, I'll give a little more detail on this as we go, but this content has been optimized for BW4HANA. Most of you probably know what that means to a large extent, but just to kind of summarize it briefly, because we've done a lot of simplification and added capabilities to the new BW objects, the Advanced Data Store object and the composite provider specifically, we're able to simplify the architecture in terms of the number of layers and the number of objects that are required for each of these areas. Sorry, got to advance the slide here. So this content that I'm talking about here was released, basically RTC was at the end of last year. We basically delivered it, as you probably know, BW4HANA was released in the fourth quarter of last year. We also released basically 2 content add-ons. The first one, the BW4 Cont B, is essentially that level that I talked about, the lowest level of granularity, where we have the info objects, the application components and info areas, variables, and other related things that that enable the higher level content. The second, didn't work. Sorry. The second content add-on, the BW4 Cont add-on, contains essentially what I was showing on that last slide. It's really the process-specific and industry-specific content objects. Obviously, they're HANA optimized. It's HANA optimized business content. When you go to BW4 content, the old artifacts are no longer supported, so you can't have info cubes. You can't have traditional data store objects. So all of this content is basically in the new objects that help you to simplify the overall architecture and accordingly reduce the TCO, since there's less to maintain and it's easier to adapt to new business requirements. So there are going to be additional quarterly deliveries of SPs. Right now, I don't have a kind of a roadmap for that. We'll work on that. But again, this is one of the reasons I also want to collect as much input from you folks to know what's most important, so that we can try to prioritize that content accordingly. So I talked about the old artifacts versus the new artifacts, and I'm afraid if you've seen BW4HANA roadmap or other presentations, you're probably somewhat familiar with this, but I'll just cover it briefly anyway. So on the left-hand side of this chart here, you see the classic BW objects, where we had providers and info sets and composite providers. The ones on the top in light blue are virtual info providers, in that they do not persist data underneath of them. They just link other info providers that do persist data. In the old artifacts, the info cube, the data store objects, the PSA table, those all persisted data. And obviously, when you're running your BW on HANA or BW4 HANA, customers are interested in minimizing the footprint that they have in HANA, since they pay based on the amount of data that they store there. Excuse me. So obviously, if you have multiple objects that persist data in a data flow, then you're going to be taking up more space than if you have less layers and less objects that persist data. Like it says on the side here, the new content is built using the Advanced Data Store objects and the composite providers. It has a new set of variables that work with the SAP exits and provide text variables, and has consistent naming conventions now in the new content. I mentioned this, what I was talking about, streamlined persistence in terms of the layers. There's also streamlined persistence in terms of the characteristics by using the navigational attributes in the zero cal day info object. So a number of optimizations that help both in terms of performance, but also in terms of limiting the footprint that the customer has in their database. The top left was basically the objects within the data flow. The data flow has to start somewhere, though. So when we talk about the sources, in the classic BW world, we had DB Connect, UD Connect. We had a number of different types of sources that can be brought in to BW. As we go to BW4HANA, all of these 5 on the top are consolidated into one, which is known as a HANA source system, and the HANA EIM capabilities are leveraged within that to provide the different services that required these other types of artifacts in the past. For extractors, So basically, all of the extractors in BW4HANA have to use the ODP in order to connect. In the old BW world, there was something called a myself connection, which allowed you to connect directly to those extractors. That's no longer possible. So with the new content, they are all based on the ODP-enabled data sources. There is actually, most of the extractors that were delivered for the classic content will run for an ODP. There is an SAP note that lists, it's essentially a blacklist. It shows which extractors will not run on ODP. That is the vast minority, so that's why we go with a blacklist instead of listing those that are enabled. If you have specific questions on that, feel free to give me a call or send me an email, and I'll get you the answers. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on LSA or LSA++, but I'll just, for those of you that don't know, with the classic BW and BW on HANA, we had an architecture that was known as LSA, or the layered scalable architecture, and that prescribed different layers within there. As we moved to HANA, we were able to condense some of that and simplify the LSA architecture, and that's where the ++ came from. So essentially, we've made this recommended architecture within BW simpler using the new objects. Essentially, with the content, we deliver the principal layers, including the virtual data mart layer, which typically is those composite providers, and basically the EDW layers in here, the architected data marts, are all delivered as part of that content. We also, as I mentioned, we don't deliver as business content the extractors, but those extractors are made available by the appropriate applications areas, and like I said, most of those are ODP enabled and can run with BW4HANA. If anybody has detailed questions on the LSA architecture or LSA++, I'm happy to take those at the end, or we could have a separate session for that, depending on the interest. So I'll talk a little bit about how what I just described impacts the actual content that Natasha and her team has developed. So this is just an example data flow. This is one from the accounts payable area. The corporate memory layer within LSA and within LSA++ is in fact optional. The main purpose of it is to basically keep the detailed data before it's aggregated or moved into other formats, essentially enabling you to reload and fix different errors that might occur. So it is optional. In the past, there was something called write-optimized data store objects that were typically used. In the new data flows, you have an advanced data store object that is field-based, so it doesn't use info objects. There are a number of reasons for that, but obviously not all data that you bring in is going to be SAP data, and that doesn't always fit to info objects well. So one of the things we've enabled with the later versions of BW on HANA and with BW4HANA is the ability to do this field-based modeling where you don't necessarily have to have info objects for everything that you want to bring in into your data warehouse. So then the next layer, in the EDW core layer, we have the info source, and that info source will feed an advanced data store object which functions the same way that the old info cubes did in terms of providing the multi-dimensional access to it. So it's a different type of object, but it can be configured to look like one of the write-optimized data store objects in the corporate memory, or the one that's created for the EDW core layer acts like an info cube. used to in terms of providing that multidimensional access. And then a composite provider on top of that provides this virtualization layer. The virtualization layer is where your queries are built. And essentially, in the old architecture, there were multi-providers in that layer and composite. Now the composite provider takes the place of the old multi-providers and the old composite providers. So, like I say, the reporting in the composite providers is based on the advanced DSOs. The business transformations happen basically between the info source and the core layer in here. So, again, you have your corporate memory is before those transformations take place, and then you have the business transformations take place between that info source and the layer that provides you with the multidimensional access. And the open operational data store layer is available where useful. And if people are not familiar with that, an open operational data store allows BW access to data outside of BW at a virtualized level. So you don't have to actually load the data into BW. If you have other data that's persisted in HANA or in any of the other databases that are supported by Smart Data Access, you can link those into one of these data flows using that open operational data store layer. And like I said, the corporate memory is modeled as field-based advanced data store objects. Back to the business areas, and I guess, well, I mean, there probably aren't any questions on this. I'm going to, right after this, we'll start to get into some of the details of what's in each of those. And like I say, if you have questions as I'm going through it, go ahead and put them in the chat. Otherwise, we can get to them when we get to the end here. So I'll talk first about sales and distribution. Obviously, it's in ERP. It's referred to as SD. We provide a number of things. We've got a sales overview that has a great deal of information coming from a number of different sources. Typical kind of summary information in the sales overview. We also then have delivery and service data and conditions. This is kind of a repetition of what I've already said, except for the last bullet. And because of the capabilities that are built into the new objects, the advanced data store object and the composite provider, we're able to provide a higher level of detail so that you can drill down right to the line item and schedule line level within SD. Like I said, a lot of technical information. I'm not going to. I'll do a little bit on one of these. I'm not going to go through each one of these and try to explain to you what everything on the slide is. I probably wouldn't do it right anyway. Natasha could, but we don't. I don't think that's necessarily the the value that you guys want. So essentially, we list here the extractors that pull the data out, the names of these, just like in the previous slide. This is the corporate memory layer. So you've got, basically below, coming directly out of the info source. I'm sorry, the data source. You've got it goes to the corporate memory, and it also goes to basically to info objects in the data source that then go to the advanced data store object. These, let me see, six advanced data store objects are then linked using one composite provider to provide the sales overview. A second composite provider provides you with delivery information, and the third one provides you with the billing information. I believe there's more on the SD. Yeah, we've got one more slide. The conditions that I mentioned here too, where essentially you're looking at the sales documents and the billing document conditions. And then those, again, create two separate, an order condition, advanced data store object, and a billing condition, ADSO. Those are combined in a conditions composite provider. Let's see. Oh, actually, let me see here. I'm going to look in. Okay, sorry, Christian. I know Natasha's kind of already answered this. We are talking with all of the SAP Cloud application teams in terms of content. Some of that, as you probably know, is already provided indirectly. For example, with SuccessFactors on the HR side, there's a fair bit of SuccessFactors data which is brought into the traditional HCM content. So basically, we've got a conduit to that. We are looking at building additional content. Right now on the BW4HANA roadmap, that additional integration with the cloud applications is in the future direction. It's not what's coming in the next releases. So it's a little ways out. But we're aware of the need for that. I'm in particular also working on some kind of best practices documents in terms of how you make those connections, because as most of you probably know, in the cloud is not one thing. There are lots of clouds, and they're not necessarily connected in the ways we might want them to. So there's a number of questions we have to address on that, how people are going to do that, and essentially what the best practices will be in integrating cloud-based applications. Yeah, and as Natasha mentioned, the extractors are released in S4 for the content that's delivered. There are some specific issues with S4. If people want to talk about that, again, happy to set up a separate call to discuss it. I could get a couple of the S4 colleagues on that as well. But yeah, we're able to integrate a lot of the S4 data as is using the existing extractors. So let's see. The next area that we talk about is delivery service. Again, I think now folks are pretty familiar with the format of this. You've got where the data is coming from, the corporate memory layer, then that inbound layer in the EDW core, which then goes through a process of business transformations and is loaded into the advanced data store object that provides the multi-dimensional access. Those are then combined. In this case, and Natasha, tell me if I get this wrong, but it looks to me as though the order header feeds into the service level overview ADSO as well, and then you have a composite on top of that, which is where you build your queries.
Yeah, here in this case, the service level is a little bit more complicated from the business logic. That's why we have more DSO in this data flow, because to calculate things like how much too late is an order, how many days too late is an order, we have to do some calculations on the BW, and that is why we need more DSOs after each other. So this is a data mart layer on the right-hand side, the 51 and 52, and it's a little bit more complex example for the content.
Sure. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, so I mean, you can see the number of sources that are coming in and how they have to then be linked together to basically implement the logic that Natasha was talking about in terms of calculating those various service levels. Then in the purchasing area, again, we have an overview. We have contract management content, purchasing accounting content, and service delivery content. And then we'll talk about the invoice verification content as well, under purchasing. Same thing here as in the previous one. You have a higher level of drill down capabilities. You can get down to the item and schedule line item level, basically where before you were not able to get that level of detail. I'm sorry. I'm also looking at the chat as we're going here, so I'm going to. Natasha is answering there. Christian, there's obviously a lot that we need to do in terms of the integration with core data services, and that again is not something we can do on our own. We have to do that in conjunction, in collaboration with the teams that provide those as part of their applications. I've submitted a number of requirements But unfortunately, requirements from me are not nearly as important as ones from you or ones from our customers. So I would like, eventually, I would like BW to both consume, generate, and merge core data services, and that's a nice wish list. We'll see in the near future. We'll get some idea as to what might be in the roadmap. So again, we'll have some detail on the purchasing here, in terms of basically in terms of how we you know, the number of different sources, how they're combined into the DSOs, and then the composite providers. So of course, with the purchase overview, you're going to be combining the majority of these. In fact, I think the only one that isn't in this case is the purchase order delivery is not part of that. Where there's, you know, and like I say, each of these on the far right-hand side is a composite provider, and the queries are built on top of that. That's also a layer where you can link additional information if necessary into this using those composite providers. A little bit more. This was I mentioned that there's also the invoice verification, and in this case, that's not quite as complex. It's pretty straightforward. One info source, one ADSO, and one composite provider for that. There we go. Inventory management, and this is of course one that is very much in demand usually. Things about stock movements and the like are not easy to calculate. Essentially, it's not easy to calculate in any way other than in BW so far. Largely, you know, we have a number of things that are done that include calculations that require the semantics that are stored in info objects and things like that. So it's not a simple thing to build, and we've provided that. Yeah, I mean, I'm not even going to try to explain this, but you can see there's a number of different things that go into it, and then some fairly complex calculations here, which is why, again, you've got a couple of layers of DSO. I'm sorry, you've got one layer of DSOs, but a number of info sources that feed into those, and then one composite that provides you with access and one point to build your queries on. Accounts receivable, nothing new here. Again, higher level of detail, ability to drill down to the line item level. So essentially, we're, you know, building from here. We're essentially building one ADSO from two different sources, then one composite on top of that. Natasha, I'm not entirely sure what the BW replicated part means. Can you add any flavor on that? That
is one of the scenarios that in the BW on HANA content we had a mixed scenario where we could get the real-time data from the HANA side. So one scenario was called the real-time scenario, which had HANA views in the data flow, but this is not yet delivered on BW4HANA, and this scenario is using only the replicated data from the suite system. So that's why we called it BW replicated, because it's the scenario that doesn't use the real-time data.
That's good. That reminds me, I was going to mention this at the beginning, but so most of you have probably heard of the mixed scenarios, and I'm sure you know also that a lot of people are trying to sell HANA full use license, and when you do that, people build their own HANA artifacts. They build calculation views and attribute views and things like that. The mixed scenarios essentially take what you've been seeing on these flows, which are BW artifacts, like eventually the composite provider and the queries that go on top of that. What the mixed scenarios do is they mix native HANA artifacts with the BW artifacts in order to provide, excuse me, access to additional information. That additional information can take a number of forms. The one that Natasha was just talking about, and the one that has been most common among the customers that I've worked with, is when you have a requirement for lower data latency. So, for example, maybe sales orders get replicated from the ERP system into BW once a day. So by noon, you basically have a half a day's worth of sales orders that are not available in your reporting. In a mixed scenario, you can replicate the data from the source system into tables in HANA, build a calculation view on top of that, and then link that to the BW content either through an open operational data store view or directly through the composite provider. And we have at least two scenarios where we've done that in the BW on HANA content because of the essentially what's happened is in HANA as we moved from HANA 1.0 to HANA 2.0, there are a number of new types of HANA artifacts which we need BW to generate in order to facilitate those mixed scenarios. That's the reason that the content that we've built that is mixed scenarios is not released at this point. So in this case, you get the historic data from the accounts receivable. You don't get the real-time data. Of course, you can do that yourself. You can go in and build that calculation view and link it into the delivered composite provider here and have that mixed scenario right now. But until we have those artifacts being built, being generated from BW4HANA, we're not releasing the content itself. If anyone needs that or needs to talk about that further, give me a call or send me an email, and we'll arrange it. Like I say, there's a number of things that have been built for BW7.5 on HANA, and we could at very least use that as a template to help your customers to build their own. Like I say, if people need those mixed scenarios, let me know. And as you think about what content we should be delivering, if there's content that is delivered that is, I'll say, deficient in terms of the latency, and you need both historic and real-time data in there, that's a reasonable request as well. Let us know, and we can look at how that can be delivered as well.
And maybe another good example for the mixed content is also that you could use data that you have in the BW, and these advanced DSO, for example, generates a calculation view on the HANA side, and then you can do whatever capability you want to use from the HANA side to do calculations on top of the BW data and give this result back to a composite provider on the BW side. So this scenario helps often to do calculations that were in former times either too slow on BW side or they were not even possible with BW features. So I think that's also a great way of using the HANA capabilities to get further insights in your data than you could before with the BW.
Yeah, that's a good point, Natasha. And I mean, we don't need to get into the discussion of BW versus native development, but what I will say is that in most of our, I'll say in our customers that have a relatively mature enterprise data warehouse strategy, they're going to do both. And like Natasha says, with BW4HANA, we can generate native HANA artifacts from the BW info providers. In fact, we can generate them from the queries as well. So if people need, in a native HANA development, they want access to data that's in BW, and they want to be able to encapsulate that into their HANA views, they're able to do that basically by generating the views either from the info provider or from the queries. Accounts payable, yeah, again, higher level of detail. I think there was also, well, I don't know if it's in this case here, but there are scenarios where you're going to want to have real-time or low latency access to accounts payable. Many of you probably remember, I think three or four Sapphires ago in one of the keynotes, the scenario pitching HANA was how you can go out and collect money from your customers. That's basically in real time. Have access to their dunning, their dunning letters, And, so there are scenarios in all of these cases where you might want to modify the content to include real-time data or other data from other systems. And in that case, like I say, that's one of the reasons this virtual data mart layer is really important. It allows you to take what's delivered in terms of the content and add your own things underneath of that and link them in. GL. So basically, and again, we have kind of a summary level, general ledger, and in this case, we've got a couple of different views into that. So let's see, and you can build queries on top of each of these composites. So asset accounting is another area where we've built content and have reasonably high demand. Obviously, basically, when you do things like depreciation, it's important to be able to do analysis on that, and typically in real time, because people are going to be doing sort of an interactive planning with respect to asset planning. So this kind of information is pretty critical in that respect. Not much that needs to be said here. We just have two advanced data store objects combined into the one composite that provides you with the transactions and the annual and the period to date values. So in controlling, again, we have a number of different areas that traditionally were delivered and that are fairly heavily used by our kind of traditional BW and BW4HANA customers. So we've got, like I say, cost center accounting, overhead cost orders, and overhead projects are all areas that have been very popular among the customers. In the cost center accounting, you end up with basically two different composites, one allowing you for statistical key figures, the other one giving you costs. Let me see. So then we have the overhead costs. Also, too, we have costs and statistical key figures. Same thing for overhead projects. Sorry, yeah, exactly. The WBS elements, costs and statistical key figures. So then we have profit center accounting. Basically, one composite that combines the totals, statistical key figures, line items, and basically the line item actuals and the line item periodic transfer actuals. The master data governance. Now, of course, not every customer has master data governance, but if they do, we've made it a lot easier to link that into BW, essentially through these capabilities that are mentioned here. Also, there are, and I won't get into all of the details, but the different applications that we've provided have not used the same data models in the past. So if you have a customer in the business suite and you have a customer in another application, they may not look or be called the same things. So what they did is Natasha and her team created these consolidated info objects. So for example, this info object, the 0GN custom, is based on the customer and the business partner, which are two different data models that essentially can be a customer. The vendor, same thing. You have a vendor object. You also have a business partner object that is of the type vendor. And then the product has been essentially defined as zero material, and that is also part of zero material is the bill of materials, kind of lowest granular object, but it's also the level at which you have products. So that's been consolidated into the zero product info object as part of the effort that Natasha's team has done. and again uses the advanced data store objects. There's basically some key mapping capabilities that are done in MDG, so yeah, I mean you can look at these. I'm providing the slides, so I won't try to go into the detail on each of these. Then the first of the industry verticals that were addressed was the utilities industry. Again, very interested in hearing from you folks what you need. You know, what are the verticals where you're getting the most demand, and in particular ones where they need content. They need something that gives them a short time to value, so they can essentially get value very quickly by implementing it. Like I said, I have reached out to the leaders of the industry groups. They do have a lot of other things to do, so I'm not necessarily on the top of their list. But if you guys have requests, that helps. If I can refer to requests from the field or requests from customers, I get a little bit more attention and possibly things get prioritized a little bit higher. A number of links here. Like I say, the slides will be made available afterwards anyway. So here's a number of links for additional, so basically the scope documents and then a number of different SAP notes that might be of interest to you. And then it says here to contact Natasha. You can do that too, but please copy me as well if you're going to send anything to Natasha. I'm trying to kind of be a single point of contact to consolidate this until we have a more formal process in place. So yeah, I would appreciate that, and don't be shy. And I mean, if you can't tell me exactly what you want, I can set up a call and we can do it that way, whatever is easiest. But just let me know if you have suggestions, and we'll follow up however is appropriate. I don't think I have anything in the appendix here. Oh, well, I did. Yeah, that's right. It's the consolidated info objects. And basically, that's all of the slides I have. I went through most of the detailed ones very quickly. And if you do have questions on any of the details, I can go back to those slides now in the Q&A period. Just wanted to, if you give me just a second, I'm going to look and see if we have anything in the chat that wasn't answered. And then, so basically, rather than opening all the lines, all you have to do if you want to ask a question on the line here is press *6, and that will unmute your line. Tom's asking what is a consolidated info object, and again, my sort of non-technical definition is when somebody created a thing called customer in CRM, and then they created a thing called business partner in ERP, they didn't necessarily make it have all the same attributes. They didn't make it look the same. So a business partner, which can be a vendor, or they can be a customer, or they can be a number of different things, has certain attributes and names for those attributes. I mean, obviously, a customer or a business partner is going to have addresses associated with it too, so there are links to addresses. So essentially, the models, the way they've persisted the data in different applications is not the same. When we create an info object in BW, we need to accommodate all of those sources. So the consolidated info object has taken the attributes of the different definitions of that object that we have in our applications and created one that accommodates all of the attributes and functions of those different objects. Does that answer the question?
And it's also used to do the, if you have a customer in your system, it might have the number 1000, and you have another customer which is called 2000, but both customers in the end are the same customer. There has been some history or some typing mistakes when the customer was created, and now you have two customers, but in the end it's one. And the master data governance system helps to find these duplicates, for example, and then map it to one single truth of the customer number. And this is also reflected, this consolidated master data is also reflected in the consolidated info objects. So we load from the MDG, we can load these cleansed data into the BW, and you can do then your reporting on top of the cleansed master data. And that's what's hold in these consolidated info objects also.
That's a good point, Natasha. And I'll just add a little bit to that because I used to work on master data. So typically what most traditional data warehouses have done is fixed the symptom. So if they get Brian Wood customer number 1000 and Brian Wood customer number 2000, they put some logic into their loading of the data warehouse that says, these two are the same thing, put them together. And that's great, except that they came from somewhere. So there is a source system that's feeding that where there's an error. So we need to always push this kind of issue back to those systems of record. And that's one of the reasons we built MDG. So the master data governance allows you to identify a system of record and identify those other systems which, for want of a better word, I'll say subscribe to that data, right? So it's important to make sure that not only do you fix it in the consolidated info object in BW, but that you also push that information back either into MDG or into whatever your master data governance processes are so that you fix the problem, not just the symptom. Otherwise, each time you load data, you have to fix it again. So, okay, let's, and again, if there are, let me see if we've got something. Tom, did we answer that, or is there still a question? If you want to ask more on that one, or if anyone has other questions, just push *6 and go ahead and ask on the phone. So I'm just going to, reiterate what I've said a few times here, which is that I believe, first of all, that the business content really differentiates our solution. And in order for that to continue to be true, we need to prioritize those things that our customers need in terms of content. So, please do, talk with your colleagues, talk with your customers, find out, what do they consider to be, and it's not just a question of what are the existing holes in what we do provide, but what are the things that would help them the most to get value quickly from their BW4HANA solutions? I'm not an expert on a lot of industries. I did spend about 25 years in consulting, and I worked in a lot of industries. In the retail industry, you find that customers tend to spend somewhere between 30 and 35% of their top line on sales, on trade promotions management, and they don't really know what return they get on that. So that's an area that I've always pushed. I'm sure you guys, if you deal with specific industries, you know what it is that keeps their C-level guys up at night. And that's the kind of stuff we want to address with the content. If there are specific things, if you're in utilities and you worry about utilization or you worry, again, I'm not going to pretend to be the business expert on every industry. And in fact, even within the industry, it's your value proposition. The important things to Neiman Marcus are not the same things that are important to Walmart. So those are the kind of things, once we get to business content, the value is driven by the needs of those specific customers, not by the technical aspect of it. So please help us to make it as relevant and as valuable as possible to your customers.
Hey, Brian.
Sorry? Yep.
Hi, Brian. Yeah, hey, this is Tom. Thank you for answering. Business content, no question, is very important, especially when we address today, why do we need BW when we have free use license for HANA? Often we kind of push business content as the, essentially the front runner of the why. So yeah, it's very important. That's why I was asking the question on the consolidated info object as well. I just had that follow-up question that's on the chat. So when we address consolidated info objects, are they essentially compounded with the source system ID, or are we saying that they will be populated from essentially another layer of info objects in the BW already?
The top info objects, the GN custom, are not compounded.
Okay.
But they are populated, like you said, using the information that's compounded.
We're getting an echo on your end there, Nick. I don't know if you have a speaker or something on, but it's echoing.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Let me dial in from a phone. Thanks.
So, any other questions from anyone? And they don't have to be technical questions. I'm surprised there aren't more questions. That's just, I guess, the nature of things. But I don't want to, I mean, we still have I think about 8 minutes left here. We can continue here if people have additional questions. If you're more comfortable doing one-on-ones, send me an email and I'll set up a call with you and we can go through it. And like I say, we really need your help to kind of be the tip of the spear here and find out from our customers, what do you like, what do you not like, what do you wish was there? Those are really important to us. Not that we have the resources to deliver everything that everyone wants, but the more information we have, of course, the better decisions we can make in how we do deploy our resources. Does anybody on the phone have a customer that's attempting to deploy BW4HANA right now? That's willing to speak up?
Hey, Greg. Can you hear me okay? Tom again.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, I do have customers, and they're already on Simple Finance. They call it S4. Yeah, I mean, they're making decisions on the next logical step, which is like reporting and BW strategy. Again, they're debating, native HANA versus BW. That's what I was just stating, that, I mean, business content is crucial for us to push BW in front of them. And this is that front runner of reasons why we needed to deliver the value of BW versus native HANA. So, yeah, it's very important. I mean, almost as much as possible, get the parity between BW4HANA and, original BW content.
The customers that are working on this right now, are they, I guess, two-part question, are they aware of and are they using the content add-ons that we've been talking about? And are they building their own content? Is it a combination or mostly one or the other?
They are using HANA Live, and they have full-use HANA license. This is that debate of why we need BW if we already have full HANA license. We can build, we can take advantage, deliver HANA Live content, and then build our own data models on top of it. So that's
of course, HANA Live content only works on the traditional ECC data model, right? So, for example, they can't use HANA Live directly with their S4 because the tables are not the same. And so,
right.
Yeah, so I mean, it is interesting that they're using that. I mean, one of the things that I hear all the time, I hear of customers that are implementing BW4HANA and S4, and they want to know where they should put the data. Should it be in the S4 or in BW? Again, why do we need BW? And, Tom mentioned one of the reasons already, but I'll tell you the biggest reason, and I'm happy to have follow-up sessions with anybody that wants to talk this out, but essentially, we don't recommend that you modify the data model under your S4 systems to include data that's not part of that system. So with S4 and S4 Analytics, you get great reporting on the S4 data. Just like with HANA Live, you get great reporting on the ECC data. What you don't get is the ability to bring in, for example, data from partners. You don't have the ability to bring in data from, analysts, from credit agencies, from data providers that give you demographic and other information about your customers. All of the external data that does not come from that source system needs to be integrated somewhere. And kind of the summary, it was interesting. We had Hasso give a keynote 2 or 3 years ago where he didn't say the data warehouse is dead, but it was sort of implied. Then last year, if any of you went to Sapphire, you may have noticed that 6 times in the first 5 minutes of his keynote, he mentioned BW. Because he realized, after a little prodding from some of us, that in fact you absolutely still need a data warehouse. And you need it to integrate data from multiple sources. So that's one aspect. Another very important aspect, which is essentially what we were talking about with the consolidated info objects, is that you need to do data model and actual data harmonization. So for example, if one source system has city and state, where state is a 2-letter abbreviation, and the other one has 2 text fields for that, you can't do analysis on it if they're not the same. You have to harmonize not just the field that that state goes into, but also the data that's in there. So if it says Rhode Island in there, I can convert that to an RI in the 2-character field. And, you know, so any kind of data harmonization, any kind of data model harmonization. So, for example, I mentioned addresses. Well, some not very forward-looking systems put address on the customer record. And, of course, then you have to have a fixed number. So you might have home address and work address and property address and billing address and whatever else address you want. But it's a fixed number. In a fully normalized data model, that's not the way it works. There's a separate table with addresses, and then there's a type. So you can have 6 addresses with 6 different types for one customer. You can have one-to-many or many-to-many relationships in there. Those are all things that need to be harmonized somewhere. And doing it in the system that you use for transactions, the system that keeps the lights on, is not recommended. It's not a best practice, and it's one of the reasons we got data warehouses to begin with. That has not gone away. That's still the case, and that's probably, I mean, if you've got anybody in your meeting who participates in their audit committee, they're sold already. They're not going to let you do it another way, you know. So I think, you know, I think it's important to understand that there are a lot of reasons why people need a data warehouse. They can build one themselves, and if they do, again, that's another hour-long session I'd be happy to do if anyone's interested. But there are advantages and disadvantages, and they're not all obvious. So I'm happy to have that conversation with any of you that would like or that need help. And if you're going to have that conversation with customers and you want help, I'm also happy to join those calls as well. So just let me know how I can help. I do get up on my soapbox every now and then. Sorry about that.
Brian, I was just going to say, we're at the top of the hour, so it might be best to kind of wrap up if you're okay with that.
It's fine by me. Like I said, everybody, don't be shy. If there's any follow-up or any other questions, send me an email or give me a call. Happy to do it. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, great. Well, I would like to thank both Brian and Natasha for a very informative session and thank everyone who joined today. Please make sure to answer the poll questions that will appear on your screen so that we may continue to bring you high-quality and relevant sessions. The recording and presentation for this session will be uploaded to the Platform GTM Sales Acceleration Series Jam page within the next few business days. Thank you.